thank you for joining. It's nice to have all of you in person and on Zoom since you couldn't make it. Hopefully, you're safe at home and warm and out of the rain. So, we're going to discuss today and focus mainly on your role in helping a seller sell their home in a fire zone. But there's going to be a lot of information. So hopefully you've got that FHDS in front of you and you can take some notes and if this, then this and this. But what are we going to talk about today? What is required of a seller selling in a fire zone? And how do I help my buyer understand what's required of them if they sell in a fire zone? So when you order a natural hazard disclosure, most of the NHD companies, depends on who you select, are providing two different maps. The first map you're going to see when you open like Disclosure Sources NHD is going to be the statutory or state map. This is the map that drives whether or not your seller will need to provide the FHDS, the Fire Hardening and Defensible Space form that you're looking at, that disclosure and addendum. Do you remember? It's been about 6 years ago. This was an advisory as well. It had a box that you could check as an advisory. It is not an advisory anymore. And your seller will not provide this if they are not legally obligated to. Because, and you're going to see why. If the parcel does not fall in a high or very high severity zone on the state or statutory map, your seller will not be required to provide the FHDS. But if they do fall in that, there's two zones that actually are determined on that map. One is high, very high fire severity zone. The other one is called a wildland area. And the reason that's important to see the difference is because in wildland fire areas, you're going to have the state managing the defensible space and doing the inspections. In city limits, you're going to have the local jurisdiction doing the inspections. Another big reason you want to know is because the locals charge, but the state does not. So preparing your seller for the cost for what needs to be done, or your buyer if it's passed on. And that's all we're going to talk about, all of that. But just for right now, remember there are two maps on that form, on that NHD. And the first one is the state or statutory map. That's the one that drives whether or not your seller is going to need to provide the FHDS. Now, here's the civil code, and I find this very interesting. For you, if you're all licensed realtors or brokers, it is on you. The civil code puts the responsibility on the agent, broker, agent to select a reputable NHD company that will protect your seller. Even though natural hazard disclosure companies are supposed to protect your seller, some have fine print verbiage way hidden in the deep end of the pool that you will find that says that they won't defend you, that you're on your own E&O if there's a lawsuit, or will only defend you up to a certain dollar limit. So one of the things I will say, and of course, I'm going to travel here just like you're going to travel to take a listing because we want to work with you. Margaret and Renita want your business. They want to help you. But why Disclosure Source? Because when it comes to the civil code, we follow it to the letter of the law. And we protect you with 60 million in E&O on every transaction. Now, I hope you sell something more than 60 million, but I probably not. But that's big numbers of protection. What we're going to do with questions is we're going to on the chat if you're on Zoom, and then we are going to take breaks because we want to honor your time that you're here. In respect, we're going to try to keep this to an hour. So if you guys don't mind, if we can, we'll take some breaks and ask questions. But that's really important to vet your vendor, whoever you're using, but hopefully you're using Disclosure Source. So here's a photograph of the wildland area that I mentioned. It might, your seller might go, well, it doesn't say I'm in a high severity zone. Well, on the map, we're going to show you if they're in a wildland area. And then we do a deep dive on that and tell you the level of severity. So all you have to do is go to the summary pages in the report. Super easy. They're right after the pictures, the maps, and the signing page. And you can click on anything in the report and it will take you to that section. And what's nice about that is you look smart to your seller and buyer, because there's a couple of pages, the summary pages, and they say to you, hey, let me ask your name. Mitchell? Hey, Mitchell, you showed me the tax section. Can we go back and look at that? And Mitchell's like, oh no. Or he's like, sure. He goes to the summary pages. Everything is sectioned into the state map, the local maps, the additional tax information, the environmental section. So you can go down to that section, click on it, and it's going to take you straight to that section in the report. So if you see there in a wildland area, you're going to click on that and it's going to take you straight to that section and tell you exactly what's going on, why they're determined to be in that zone and what that is, whether it's low, moderate, high, or very high. Super simple and easy to navigate in the natural hazard with Disclosure Source. Okay, so also another nice feature, you're going to see there was a law passed, Assembly Bill 1280, and that required that natural hazard disclosure companies give you an extra little piece of information. And we put it right on the signing page because it's going to tell you right above it, if yes, they're in a fire zone, then it's going to tell you whether or not they're in a state or a local jurisdiction. You'll see those 3 lines with the little box. One of them is going to be checked if they're in a fire zone that's high or very high. And so when you see that little section right there, you're going to want to look closely at it. And I'll show you why in a minute, because it'll say high or very high FHSZ, fire hazard zone, if FH, sorry, fire hazard responsibility zone. Okay, so that you're going to see where that parcel is. Is it in a state or a local as well? So that will help you. And then you notice the other blue arrow that I have there at the bottom. So back a while ago, when they changed the RPA several times ago, they added links as considered delivery. So we have linked all the earthquake lead-based paint. HERS booklet is all right there on the signing page. They can simply click on that and it will open that booklet for them. So you have another layer of protection showing that you delivered that, because now links are considered delivery in the RPA. So FYI, you can use that as well. Plus, when you order from us, we provide you all those booklets attached separately and an additional file that has all the signing pages separated out so you don't have to pull them out of the report. We make it really easy for you and your transaction coordinator. So just know that that's all there for you. So here we go. We're going to break down the FHDS, Fire Hardening and Defensible Space Form. But before we do that, let's have a super transparent conversation about the WFDA. And by the way, this is all being recorded, right, Jody? So you can get a copy from Jody and you don't have to take pictures and so forth. You can get a copy, so don't worry. Why did I bring up that it's so important to have a transparent conversation about the WFDA? Because there are going to be times when your seller is not going to be legally obligated to provide the FHDS. And the home is in a high or very high severity zone. And now the buyer buying a home that they didn't get this form that doesn't tell them what's going on here, what the seller's done or what they're being asked to do. Now they're going to need to understand, as a buyer buying in a fire zone, just what their responsibilities are. I'm going to go through all of that with you, but just keep that in the back of your mind. You know, you see the WFDA in every transaction now, right? It's like in every file ever since Santa Rosa burned down. I live in a no fire zone area whatsoever, and I'd probably have it in my file if I sold my house. Everybody uses it, but don't let it be that document that just gets pushed aside because it's in every file. If you look at the natural hazard and you see the home is in a fire zone and they did not provide you with the FHDS, then you're going to sit down with your buyer and have a discussion with them. Or you could be sitting down months later in a courtroom while they're trying to get some money out of you for what they had to do to bring it into compliance. So I think that's a very important, transparent conversation. And we're going to talk about ways that they can get that information. So what I've done is I've broken this FHDS. We're looking at the 2 pages on the left there. I've broken it down into sections so we can review each section together. So the fire hardening and defensible space disclosure and addendum. What is that talking about? A lot of people go, oh, we're talking about fire hardening when they're talking about the vegetation. No. Fire hardening is the house or structures themselves. Okay. Defensible space is the vegetation around those structures. You, as a homeowner living in a fire zone, did you know everyone living in a fire zone is legally, under state, federal law, supposed to create defensible space? Kind of like when you get in your car and you came here. Did you know there was a speed limit to drive? No? You drove 100 miles an hour to get here. No. You know what's going to happen. The kicker is it's gotten much stricter and there's CHP out when something is in escrow and closes. And some areas have CHP out all the time. So you've got laws and restrictions and things you can and can't do in fire zones, just like you do in HOA areas and so forth. And there are monitors in certain areas as well. So this is going to help a buyer understand from a seller, hey, I live in an area that requires these things. And so we're going to discuss those together. So again, fire hardening is the house itself and other structures you want to protect. So it could be they have a great big RV barn or building that they store their RV, their tractors, whatever in, cars, and they want to create that protection. Maybe they want to fire harden it. So that's the two different things that this form addresses. It addresses the fire hardening, the house itself, and the defensible space, the vegetation around those structures. 1A, what's the law applicability? If you read this, there's 4 parameters on the law applicability. Number 1, contains residential 1 to 4 units. That includes condos that are up to 1 to 4 units, townhomes that are up to 1 to 4 units, duplex, triplex, fourplex, several homes on one lot, mobiles, and mobiles in parks, believe it or not. So all of that is included. What else does it require? Number 2, that the seller is completing a TDS, a transfer disclosure statement. So now, oh, the little light bulb just went on, right? My seller's not completing a TDS. How in the world would anyone be able to fill this out if they weren't filling out a TDS, right? So that's when you're going to have a seller who's not legally obligated to provide this form because they're not filling out a TDS. The kids are selling their parents' house that they've not lived in for 40 years. The parents have passed away. Maybe they're not on title. You do want to talk to your broker because there are quite a few really important parameters of who has to fill out a TDS. So make sure with your broker that your seller is exempt. If they are exempt from filling out a TDS, they're not providing this form. Okay. So that's when that WFDA we talked about becomes very important. Okay, number 3, they're in a high or very high fire severity zone. Seems like that should be 1, but anyway, it's number 3. And number 4, the improvements on the property. In other words, the house itself was built or it was tore down and rebuilt before January 1st of 2000 or after January 1st of 2010. Homes built prior to January 1st of 2010 are going to be required to complete this section of the fire hardening. Homes built after January 1st of 2010 are exempt because when you passed your inspections, you had to have all this stuff. Dual pane windows. We're going to talk about all of that. So this is where a lot of homeowners and agents get tripped up. If my home was built in 2022, do I have to provide this form? Please don't say no. Yes. I just get to skip over section 2. Okay. Every single homeowner in a high or very high severity zone, fire severity zone, whether wildland or in the city limits, high fire, are required, if they live in the home and are filling out a TDS, or if they're filling out a TDS, don't have to be living there, they're going to be required to provide this form. They just get to skip over section 2. So let's talk about the next one, and that is defensible space compliance. Remember what that is? Is that the house or is that the vegetation around the house? Right. So, and by the way, I just want to stop for a second and let you know that Jody's going to watch the chat, and we are going to stop in a few minutes and answer questions through the chat if there are any. And if I'm going to address those in a little bit in the this webinar and live class, I'll let you know. Okay. So the second one under these parameters is B, and that is the defensible space, that vegetation. Who's required to fill this portion out? Okay, we have 3 parameters. Number 1, and they're the same as A. B is the same as A, except for that date. Remember, because now they get to skip over section 2 if the home was built after January 1st of 2010. So section 1, same as section 2, except for the date. So who's going to be responsible to provide this? Number 1, residential 1 to 4 units. Does that include mobiles and parks? Does that include a condo or a townhome that's less than 4 units? Does that include a duplex, triplex, fourplex? 2 houses on one lot, 3 houses on one lot, 4 houses on one lot? Yes, all of that, 1 to 4 units. Then you've got the next one is they're in a higher, very high severities. Oh, no, sorry. They're filling out a TDS. And the next one is they're in a higher, very high severity zone. Do you notice that in B? There's no date. There is no date. Neither one of these have boxes either. These are just the parameters to guide your seller and help them understand what the law requires of them. Okay. So let's stop right there. And Jody, are there any questions in the chat? Let's address any. Okay, great. Moving on. Good job. You're paying attention. So this is the portion we talked about, the structures themselves on homes built before January 1st of 2010. Very good. So every home built prior to January 1st of 2010, or if they gutted it, rebuilt, then after 2010, they're okay. They don't have to fill this out. But anything before, they're going to need to answer these questions. And notice, these are questions that ask, this whole paragraph discusses how you can protect your home and where to go to understand better about protecting your home if you're in a fire zone. But all of these items that are yes or no are telling a buyer, hey, I'm selling my older house in a fire zone that may have a few problematic issues if there was a wildfire in the area. Now, it doesn't even address concrete siding, and a lot of lenders and insurers want you to put, change out that too, but it's addressing things that are most common. And let's look at those and see how your seller, how you guide them. Because who's filling this out? Is it the agent? You don't fill out the TDS, right? So it's always going to be that seller filling it out if they're required to do so. So number 1, eaves, soffit, and roof insulation with it. Let me just do that. Well, I can't do this, but anyway, you can hear me. Are your eaves, soffit, and roof insulation in excess of 1/8 of an inch not flame or ember resistant? Some of you guys look like you have deer in the headlight look there. Exactly. Are your eaves, soffit, and roof insulation in an excess of 1/8 of an inch not flame or ember resistant? So as a seller, what am I going to do with that? I don't know. Well, guess what? Your seller does not have to do an inspection on this for this form. They answer the questions honestly based on their current knowledge. So if they don't know, notice what it says in B, 2B. Are you seller aware of the following features that may make the home more vulnerable to wildfire and flying embers? Do I know the answer? What do I say? No, I'm not aware. No is 2 things on this form, believe it or not. It's a no, it doesn't exist. It's nope, I don't have that. And it's also no, I don't know. I'm unaware. Okay. But if I recently had a company come out, give me a bid to enclose my eave, soffit, and roof insulation, or maybe I had a company come out to tell me how I can put up that super fine. Have you ever gone up to a house to the front door and you see those either holes or little squares cut up in the eaves, and sometimes they have like mesh wire behind them? What is that? Ventilation, right? It lets the air out of the attic. And some people have things on top of the roof as well for ventilation. But they've usually got wire behind it of some sort if it's an older house to keep birds and rodents, things out of their attic, right? But we all saw when we saw on the news the wildfires. Did you see how those embers were flying, hundreds of thousands of them? So you can imagine if you've got over 1/8 of an inch, not flame or ember resistant to stop rodents, it's not going to stop embers from getting in your attic. And then what's in your attic? Insulation, right? So there goes the house. So you can actually go to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy those sheets. They have specialized companies that will come out and do fire hardening on your home. And those sheets that they sell and install, actually, when it gets to a certain temperature, they seal shut. And they are super fine. Like, I think of, they're kind of like, when you clean the vents above your stove and your hood above, and you take them out, and really good thing is, spray them with some degreaser and then throw them in the dishwasher. It gets them really clean. But anyway, I digress to a little helpful tip there. It's really fine, so an ember couldn't get through. That's what those look like. They're really fine mesh metal that can withstand the heat and the embers. So if they haven't done that and they know it, what would they do? If they're aware that they have a problem there, they're going to check yes, correct. And all of these are like that. So the next one, roof coverings are of untreated or wood shakes or wood shingles or shakes. Do you know if you have a wood shingle or a wood shake roof? Oh, heck yeah, because you're not getting insurance. There's nobody going to insure that roof, that house. So if you've got an old house with a wood shake roof, it's probably going to have to be replaced, to be honest, in a fire zone. That's just the way it is right now. And treatments, Cal Fire told me they don't even last a year. So if they had it treated 10 years ago, it's not treated anymore. And it's probably going to be really hard to get insurance. They're going to be self-insured if they've got a shake roof. So that's not talking about comp shingle. Some people get confused and think, well, I've got a shingle roof. No, you don't. Wood shake or wood shingles, what this talking about, not comp, not tile, not metal, not gravel, just wood shingle, wood shake. So they know. And what's the answer if I don't have a wood shake roof? So that's the no that you know is a no, right? Okay. So moving on. Wood coverings. Okay, we talked about number 3, combustible landscaping or materials within 5 feet of the home and under the perimeter of any attached deck. Okay, what would that be? What is combustible landscaping? It's trees, it's bushes, it's plants that are way too big. You can have plants and bushes right now, but they're looking at changing the laws as homes build to completely clear out 5 feet all around the perimeter of each foundation. But right now, in a fire zone, they're not going to not pass you, but they can't be encroaching over the window where you can't get out if there's a fire, or that's going to catch the house on fire. They've got to be trimmed away from the structure. Trees with their limbs hanging over the roof line is a big no-no. Too many trees close together. Here's a biggie. Put this back in your little reticular, whatever. No bark, no mulch, no fake tire bark, no black bark, no bark or mulch at all that is made from trees or made from tires can be put in their planter beds. I cannot tell you how many times I've gone out looking at listings and I see it's beautiful. They got that place just immaculate. And then they put all this bark in the planter beds in a very high severity zone. And I'm like, when they come out to inspect, they're going to ask them to rake that all out. So what a great thing to tell your clients ahead of time. Hey, while you're fixing up, thinking about selling, just a nugget. And I'm going to show you how you'll know if they're in a fire zone too. Don't put bark or mulch or that fake tire bark in your planter beds. They'd rather see pavers, gravel, black bark. I'm not black, excuse me. Do not say black bark. Black dirt. You can order that black dirt and it looks nice and clean if you want to clean up the beds and put something on there, or just rake out the beds. They just want to see ground and all cleared out. Okay. So what else is combustible landscaping or other materials? See that other materials? Cal Fire doesn't require that you barbecue 25 feet away from your house, but if a fire's coming, they want you to shut that tank off if it's propane, pull that barbecue way away from the house, or take the tank off and pull it far away from your house. Throw your patio cushions inside the shed or in the garage. Get rid of combustible landscaping around your house that is not, growing out of the ground, if you will, like construction materials, that kind of thing. So you want to create defensible space, you have to get rid of combustible things that are in that perimeter. So you've got, as a homeowner, you have 100 feet to create. Now you got that flyer from Margaret and Renita that shows you the parameter. So there, when an inspector's coming out, they're looking at 100 feet on all sides of the structures. You've got a hardcore 5 feet that we're talking about right here that they really want cleaned up. Then you've got another 30 feet that's importantly, and they'll give you the parameters and I'll show you how you'll know how to do that. And then you've got the next 70 or up to the property line. So if you only have 10 feet to the property line, you got 5 feet of really hardcore and then another 5 feet of that zone, that the 30-foot zone, that what they require. And we're going to look at all of that in a moment. So just know that it's 100 feet from all sides of the structures that you want to protect and or up to the property line. Okay. Any questions about combustible? We can talk about that after. Single pane or non-tempered glass windows, because we know single pane windows break, with heat much easier. So if your seller has 2 windows left that they haven't replaced, I've seen this happen lots of times. Do they have to check this box? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So any single pane windows in the home, you'll have to check the box yes. Rain gutters without metal or non-combustible gutter covers. What do you have when you don't have gutter covers? You got leaves, you got debris in your gutters, right? Unless you've got that vigilante person cleaning those gutters out every week. Stuff. And so you can imagine, believe it or not, the highest fire month is October, but didn't seem like that this month and last month. So when you can imagine, if your gutters are full of debris, little twigs that fell in it, leaves, other things that birds drop in it, and maybe plants growing up out of that stuff that's composted in there, some people have seen, you're going to have that drying out all summer long. And that's like kindling for a wildfire. Imagine if it hasn't, even if it's rained, it can dry out. So when you don't have gutter covers, you have a potential there, because when the gutter catches fire with that stuff in it, catches fire, it gets hot, it usually falls down into the planter bed below, and then it starts catching the house on fire, or it'll catch the roof. If the gutter catches fire, it can catch the eaves and so forth. So if you don't have gutter covers they need to be non-combustible. So I don't have any gutter covers. What do I do? And I know it. I have to check this box. You see, because I'm the seller's like, yeah, whatever. I mean, the buyer's like, okay, you clean the gutters, but I need to know. If you've got metal, non-combustible gutter covers, you can check no. If you're not sure if your gutter covers are non-combustible, yeah, I can check no, because I'm not sure about that. But for the most part, if I don't have any gutter covers, what am I going to do? Anybody? I have to check this box. Yes. Right? Okay. Moving on. So that is the fire hardening portion of the form. Now we're going to discuss the defensible space, the vegetation. Who's responsible? Does the seller have to create defensible space to sell their home? No. Believe it or not, no. They don't have to create fire hardening either, but they have to disclose everything, right? Like if I sell my home with termites, do I have to get all the termite work done? Not unless they're an FHA loan, by first-time home buyer, but you have to disclose, correct? Well, in this situation, people living in a fire zone do not have to bring it into compliance, but they must disclose. Anybody had a tree trimmed lately or a tree removed? Okay, this is going way back. My sons were all still living at home and they were strapping young men. And we had 3 trees that we needed to remove. We hired an arborist to go up and cut. And we took care of all of the wood, everything, cleared everything up. They were fairly large, but not huge, but fairly large. And we got a deal because we did all the major work except for cutting and dropping the limbs, and we still spent $7,000. Okay. So if I didn't have that, we're talking 15, 20 grand probably for what I had done, right? And it also depends on how close those trees are to the house, what it's going to take and what kind of specialists it will take and the equipment that they'll need to make sure they don't drop a limb or a major portion on your home. So this part of it is really helping your buyer understand What am I accepting and taking on if the seller has not done what is required by law in a fire zone? Okay. So let's talk about this portion for a few minutes. Can I ask you, one of you, to get my glasses out of my purse for me, Margaret or Renita? Sorry, I'm kind of getting older. Sorry about that. So I know this by the back of my hand, but I just want to make sure I don't steer you wrong. So do you remember we talked about on the signing page of the natural hazard from disclosure source, we're going to tell you if they're in a state or local responsibility area. Remember that? It's going to have a box check or a line checked on that. Okay. You see there 3A, local compliance requirements. The property is or is not subject to a local vegetation management ordinance requiring defensible space around an improvement on the property. Okay, so here's where, if it's in a state responsibility area, is it in a local? No, you're in one or the other. You're not in both. So if they're in a local and it says, yes, they're in a local, you're going to check is. If they're in a state, they are not in a local vegetation management area, you're going to check no. Your seller's going to check no. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. In the rare instance that your seller is filling this out and they are in a state or not in a local jurisdiction, they can actually pass on the responsibility without checking any other boxes. Is that crazy? Is that crazy? So that's where it behooves a buyer's agent to look very closely at this form. Because look at 3B1. You see where it says seller is unaware of whether the property is in compliance. I'm unaware, I'm a seller, I don't know if I'm in compliance and I don't have a report by an inspector. That's 3B1. That's the default language, okay? Where's the other default language? 3C1. Buyer responsibility, no local ordinance. Buyer will get the documentation of compliance 1 year after, you have up to a year after close of escrow to get it done. You think their insurance will give them a year? Heck no. So, this is where your really transparent conversation, besides the WFDA that we talked about, this is where that comes in. So look carefully at this form and see if there's no other boxes checked. If they checked is not in 3A and then just signed and dated it, that means they're passing on all the responsibility to the buyer. Is everybody on the same page with me? Okay. Do you want to be the buyer that gets that? A lot of buyers don't, and we're going to talk more about that. But if the seller has done all the things necessary and they brought it into compliance and they have their certificate, which is less than a year old, unless there are a few jurisdictions that, someone told me Oakland has a year certificate. Local jurisdictions supersede the state mandates. They can create smaller time limits to get it done, and they can make the report valid longer. But for the most part, this is taking the average, what's out there in the state of California. So if your seller is in a local jurisdiction, they're going to check the box 3A is, and then if they've got their report and it's less than 6 months old, we'll check box 2, property is in compliance, and I have this defensible space inspection that's less than 6 months old, unless they're in an area that changes that date, okay? Or 3, this is a box your seller will check if they're willing to get CAL FIRE out there to do the inspection. Nowhere in this box does it say that they will do what's necessary. Doesn't say they'll trim all the trees and bring it into compliance. It just says, I'll get CAL FIRE out here and I'll get the inspection for you. Here's a little caveat on that. Once you have the local or the state, inspector out, you've opened up Pandora's box. And now they're going to check. These guys just want to save homes and lives, okay? They're not out there to make your life miserable. They want to save your home and save your life. But they're going to check because now you've told them, hey, I'm in this area and I need to check out and I don't qualify. I don't meet the standards. So I got to do these things. So they'll come back out they'll give you like 30 days and they'll come back. How you doing on that? Some homeowners will say, I can't get all this done. I've been working on it. Well, let's give you another 30 days. I'll be back in 30 days. They're very good with people to help work on them. Go to the left and go down to the left. The other left. Okay. So, okay, we're at the point where the seller is not able to pass it on without saying anything, right? So they're in a local vegetation management ordinance. 3A is, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to get the inspection. I want to pass it over. Next side, turn it over, or next page. Here is where you can pass the responsibility on to the buyer. You've got two options on this selection. Number one is in a local vegetation management ordinance, which requires it as a result of sale. So we're talking point of sale areas like, I don't know if there's any out over here, El Dorado County. If you take a listing in El Dorado Hills, Placerville, Cameron Park, all of that El Dorado County, they just voted in to be a point of sale. And their time frame is 180 days, not a year. So that's why it's telling you right there, you're letting the buyer know, hey, you're buying and I want to pass you the responsibility in a local vegetation ordinance area, but there's a lesser requirement here because it states right there that you have to do it after close of escrow. And then you're going to, they're going to find out what that is in El Dorado County. Paradise, you can't even close escrow without having the documentation. There's a whole other document they have layer that is required. Auburn city limits, point of sale, 180 days, or they say 6 months, same thing, right? But just check with your inspector if you want to know. You can ask them. For the most part, you're passing it on to the buyer. So the seller's like, I'm just not doing anything. I just want to pass it on. How often do I see this? 90% of the time, 99 probably. But I see it more so. The next box 3, is where the buyer is getting the responsibility. The seller saying, hey, I'm giving you the responsibility. It's a local vegetation management ordinance that's in effect that does not require it as pointed. It's not a point of sale area, does not require it to be done in less than a year. So it's now giving them a year. But back to what will their insurance ask of them? Get it done, right? Get your parcel protected so we can insure it and we don't have to worry about it burning down if there's a fire in the area. Okay. 4, 5, and 6 are all where the seller is taking on responsibility. So you want to be very careful. 4 is where there's a local vegetation ordinance and it's a point of sale. So they have that lessened, smaller time, but it's all, if they're going to require that they get it done. Number 5 is where the seller is in a state or local, could be either one, but they already have the certificate. Here it is. Number 6, seller responsibility, where they have agreed to obtain compliance. So this is, they have not had their inspection yet, but they're going to get it. Okay. And they're letting the buyer know, we're going to get the inspection and we'll get it in compliance. We'll do the things. Unlike if we back up to that 3B3, that's saying I'll get the inspection. That doesn't say I'll bring it into compliance, right? But 3B6, or excuse me, yeah, 3B6 is saying I will bring it into compliance as well. Okay. So what are you going to do if you receive this document and you see filled out at the top, box is not under number 3. Maybe these boxes are checked, yes or no. Who knows if it's built before or after, and it's signed and dated. What does that mean? That means that the seller is in a state responsibility area and they're passing all the responsibility over to the buyer, right? Because no boxes would be checked. If they're taking on responsibility, you're going to see seller box checked. Not only the inspection side, but I also will get compliance at the end on 6. If they're already have it, you're going to see the box checked. Yeah, I've already got that certificate and here it is. And you're supposed to, if you're the agent and you're on the listing, no problem. We've already got our inspection. That's wonderful. Awesome. Thank you. Could I see that, please? Do you have a copy? Yeah, here it is. And you look at it and it's dated 2023. Are they within 6 months? No. It's dated 24 of, August. Are they within the time? They has to be less than 6 months old when you provide it to the buyer with this document, with this form, the FHDS. Okay. So now that we've gone through all of that and you understand that they've got some things to do to come into compliance, maybe a few trees to trim up, however large they are, maybe some to take out because they're too close together or too close to the house. Now you understand why a buyer needs to understand what they're taking on, because it could be 10,000, 20 grand, 50,000 if it's a large parcel. All right, let's take a break and answer questions real quick, and then we'll go to the next section. Yes, sir. Hang on a second. Just
You said earlier that the certificate is good for you want to 6 month period time. So what, sometimes those property are longer to sell, past the 6 month, I mean, you have to get another one as.
If it had the certificate, when you provide the FHDS to your buyer, must be less than 6 months old. Now you get into the transaction and that date's gone by, you're okay because you've already given all the documentation. If you have a certificate that's 8 months old and now you get a new buyer, you got to have it re-inspected because it's old. But guess what? You're going to pass a lot easier. If you passed, you're probably, unless you just need to get out there and blow the roof off and clean the gutters out, that kind of thing. Any other questions we can go?
A Zoom question.
Hang on one second. Go ahead.
And I'm not sure where this was, but where can the buyer's agent find out if it's a local or a state?
I'm going to address that in a minute.
Okay.
Two questions. Number one, so like a lot of the properties up in Los Gatos and in the mountains where it's a severe fire hazard and we have a house there, this could add up to a lot of dollars.
Good.
It could, right? Okay. And then my second question is, what about land up there?
Good question. So going back to the FHDS, residential 1 to 4 units, that's not bare land, right? So you don't have to provide this for bare land. Just know this. If a buyer is purchasing bare land, they're going to want to find out in a higher, very high severity zone, any kind of fire zone, what are the parameters of me building? I'll have to clear and thin some trees out. If it's heavily treed, I'll have to create defensible space and I'll have to build according to the current codes to pass. So I'm going to have enclosed eave soffit and roof ventilation, and I'm going to have the right kind of roof, and I'm going to have dual pane windows, and I'm going to have all those things, and I'm going to meet the requirements to pass my inspection. Do we have any other Zoom? Let me just go every other and okay. Just hang on, because everybody on Zoom cannot hear you unless I have a microphone. And I'll just hold on to it so we don't pass. Yes.
So did you say that 90% of the buyers will assume responsibilities when they sell?
That's up to your buyer if they want to, but I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from agents is, because I have a lot of agents email me and call me, can you help me with this form with my seller? And I said, what does your seller want to do? Let me look at your report. Let me see what their responsibility area is, and then answer these questions, and they'll go, yeah, they don't want to do anything. I hear that so much of the time. Very rarely do I hear that they have their certificate.
My second question is, so when the seller, if supposing they don't have the inspection done, so how would the buyer be able to get the what do you call the insurance coverage for?
So insurance is different than the cert that you have to provide, this CAL FIRE inspection certificate. So I'm going to address that in a minute. Okay. I will. No, I don't have
I sold a property that required an inspection. So the CAL FIRE folks came over and cleared my house. But while they're standing in the street, they walked over to my neighbor's house, which I didn't know in between the open houses. And $20,000 later, they removed 9 trees. So when I got there for the open house, the neighbors were furious. And I said, I had nothing to do with this. So CAL FIRE will look at not only the property it's supposed to go out to, but they'll look at the neighbors.
So I get that a lot with people who live in fire zones, that they feel like their neighbor is super egregious, like they've got grass this high and they've got, it's just, they've not created any defensible space. And they'll be like, well, what do I do? How do I, deal with that? And I tell them, here's the reality. You can call them and ask them to come look at it, but they are not going to look at that house alone. They're going to look at your house and everybody around you. They don't pick and choose, but if CAL FIRE comes out, obviously you see someone in harm's way. right? You see a house that is not defended. And what did we talk about? If you go to the civil code law, you know, if you buy in an HOA, can you paint your house purple? No, heck no, you can't. Can you park like 5 cars outside? We know how these are very strict rules. If you if you live in a fire zone, not just buy, live in a fire zone, you have laws and restrictions to protect your home, yourself, your life, and your neighbors and their lives and wildlife and so forth. So they just need to understand that CAL FIRE is probably going to look at everybody. They're not just going to look at that house that they come out and look, you know, do an inspection because they're already there.
Would it be better for the people, the owners in that neighborhood to like work together and have everything cleaned up?
What's your name?
Can I share something on that?
What's your name? Come on, tell me your name. I'm going to give you kudos. Allison? Good job, Allison. So there are actually what you call FireWise communities.
Can I share? a story
Nevada,
on
hang
that?
on one second. Nevada County has the biggest FireWise community, and they get together as communities and educate the homeowners on how to create defensible space. They help each other. It's pretty incredible because they're in a high severity zone, very high severity zone.
So my aunt and uncle live in Bonnie Doon. And if you don't know where Bonnie Doon, it's at the top of the Santa Cruz Mountains. It's not really a town, it's just neighborhoods. My aunt and uncle got together with their neighbors and did just that. And when those fires came up into that area, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, CAL FIRE used their little area as their headquarters. Everything else around where my aunt and uncle lived is gone. But about 5 or 6 houses right in this little area were saved because they all worked together to have this. So it works.
Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes and I want to keep going, but I will answer Allison's question about, so remember when I mentioned that when you get the NHD on the signing page, it's going to tell you if you're in a state or a local jurisdiction, right? So right there, right then and there, if you're in the city limits, you're in a local, period. If you're outside the limits, you could be in a state, very likely, but you could be in a local because a lot of, and we're going to look at the live CAL FIRE site, and I'm going to show you how to prepare to go out on your listing. Here's another beautiful thing. You got Renita and Margaret right there. They're a text, a phone call, or an email away to order an NHD for you. And guess what? If you don't close, no pay. We cancel it. That's pretty sweet. You can easily get and attach it. So you're not going to get buyers. Oh, we didn't know we had to get fire insurance. Okay, never mind. They're going to see the NHD. Yep, it's right in a fire zone. We need fire insurance or flood insurance. It's going to tell you what the zones are so that you can prepare your buyer whether or not they can actually go forward. So just ask them. So here's a copy from CAL FIRE of their defensible space inspection. First thing you want to do is you want to look at that date right at the top. You see that on the far right up at the top? That should be less than 6 months. Very good. Then you see that arrow, that box right there says no violations observed. Beautiful box. Okay. But otherwise, you could have all those boxes in the bracket there checked, or a lot of them. And guess what that's going to mean? Everything that needs to be done. So you usually see in real estate, a lot of CAL FIRE's inspectors and the local, whatever their form is, it'll say real estate pass or, you know, they put something like that because it's a real estate transaction. So I've seen that a lot. But remember that the local jurisdictions supersede CAL FIRE's requirements. So if they have a stricter requirement, that takes Trump's precedent, okay? And then federal land, if you sell on federal land, guess what? This is the way the government is. They don't require an inspection. Federal land does not have fire inspections, but your buyer might want to protect their home anyway. Okay. So now we're looking at the CAL FIRE map, which is something you can search. Not easy to find. So I have a link that I sent Jody that she can send you to both the CAL FIRE map and the FEMA maps, because I also teach a class on selling in flood zones, believe it or not. And so you can actually go to the California fire map and look at the parcel and see what zone it's in. I'm going to show you how to do that. But before that, when you order from us, you get a page called the AB 38 notice, right? And on that page inside the NHD is a link to schedule your defensible space inspection. So you see that blue line there on in the 38 box, the 38 AB 38 notice box? Who can schedule the inspection? Can you, the listing agent? No. Can you, the buyer? No. Can you, the buyer's agent? No. Legally, this is a government inspection, and your residential purchase agreement prohibits you from scheduling government inspections unless you have written permission from the seller to do so. When you click on that, it takes you into the CAL FIRE website, and then it asks you a bunch of questions. Your name as the owner, your address, your email, your phone number, your blood type. Just kidding, not that. But at any rate, it asks you a lot of personal, questions, and then it opens up the map with your address and makes you confirm that this is your parcel that they're going to inspect. They do like an aerial and point at it, right? So that's how a seller could, or if the seller has given your buyer written permission, then when they go in there, they're going to put the seller's name, they're going to put the address, and then they're going to put their email and phone number to contact. And then they're going to show up on the scheduled time because CAL FIRE is going to reach out to them and give them a date. And they're going to show up with that written permission. And they're going to let the seller know, just in case the seller's home and has a dog or some things they want to put away that, they don't want CAL FIRE looking at. You want to let them know ahead of time they're coming out. So you can schedule your inspection if it's not a state responsibility area. What CAL FIRE has told me is that they forward that to the local jurisdiction, or they will reply back to you and give you who you need to get a hold of if it's any local jurisdiction. Again, can you schedule that inspection with a local jurisdiction? It's also a government agency, so you are correct. No, only a seller, unless you have written permission, can schedule this. So that is why when we look at the RPA, has everybody seen that little pop down, the wildfire report, disaster report? So that's a independent company, not anything to do with CAL FIRE. That is not the inspection you need. That is not the local jurisdiction. That is an independent company who got in bed with CAR, and they charge you $140 for aerial imagery. I'm just going to say this. We refuse to offer it because we're not in the business to kill your deals. We want to help you sell your homes and help buyers buy homes. It's not our business to tell them what to do. The government tells them what they need to do when it comes to fire mitigation and defensible space. But you need, and you're still going to need, boots on the ground, real CAL FIRE or local fire department inspection. When you close escrow, whether it be the buyer or seller taking the responsibility on. This aerial imagery report, while it might tell your buyer, hey, there's all these trees that need to be cut back or trimmed, it is not the report you have to get. It's $140. You can opt to get it if you really want to. But personally, if I was a buyer's agent or a listing agent, I would be like, no, there's a better way. I would get a really reputable tree company to come out and give me a bid. And then I'd hire some licensed handyman to rake out the planter beds, trim back off, or a landscaper to clean all the vegetation up and clean out my gutters if I couldn't do it myself. But I definitely wouldn't want, because when I see the reports, they're deal killers. I'll just tell you that. I've seen homes that already had their CAL FIRE inspection have passed, and the report said they needed 20 grand in cleanup. So I'm just being transparent with you because we as a company care about your business and how we can help you. It is not our job to kill your deal. So just be very cautious. Yes, maybe in some cases where you have an egregious seller who absolutely refuses everything, that you want to spend that $140, but it's going to pretty much rip that house apart, okay, and the property. Now, we're going to go on to the CAL FIRE website, but before we do, just one last thing I want to say about Disclosure Source. I love my job and I love educating agents. It's my passion. I'm retiring, but I'm staying on one day a week just to do this only. And so, because I just feel like it's so important for agents to understand not only what's required to protect you and your license and your paycheck, but also to make sure that you and your seller are liably protected with the NHD, that it's not full of a bunch of extra fluff that is not required by law and that actually puts you in more harm's way. We follow the civil code. And so just be careful, whoever you're using, if you're not using Disclosure Source, that they have your back, that they protect you, because guess what? Natural hazard disclosure companies are not regulated. Not like you guys are all a part of this board probably. And you also have your real estate license with the DRE, which regulates you. And if you get in trouble and you do something wrong, you get your hand slapped or maybe your license revoked. NHD companies are not watched. Is that crazy? So I'm very passionate about disclosing that you need to make sure you're using a company that stands behind you, like Fidelity, a Fortune 500 company. And guess what? There's so many easy ways to get your NHD. You can call, text, or email Margaret or Renita. You can go on through SkySlope or through Disclosures.io or write to our website, or you can call. Just call up. We got awesome operators that will love to take your call. So just think about how you can order from Disclosure Source very easily. Okay, we're going to switch to the CAL FIRE website. But before we do we have any chat questions, Jody? Sorry, I should have told her ahead of time. And Jody's going to, if you want, send you a copy. Feel free to take a screenshot. You have to navigate through this and make sure you have the current CAL FIRE map. I have agents that call me and say, I'm on the map and it doesn't show it to be in a fire zone. And I'm like, what map are you on? Somehow CAL FIRE has some old maps circulating out there in their website that are not up to date. They changed all their maps this last year. And so you want to make sure you have their current maps if you're going to do some research. Okay, any questions?
It was, are all Firewise communities considered local?
No. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to use this for yourself. And we're going to take an actual address. If someone has an address, I'll search that. So you see this site, right? And do you see over on the key code there on the right, you've got FHSZ, Fire Hazard Severity Zone. It's telling you the zone they're in. Are they in a very high? Are they in a high? Are they in a moderate, a low, or not one at all? And then if you scroll down on this site, you'll see, let's see if it'll let me do it. You'll see these lines. Those lines are where a local jurisdiction is actually taking over a state jurisdiction. So it's passing on it's getting reclassified to an SRA, from an SRA state responsibility area to an LRA, local responsibility area. But most of the locals that are high and very high are red, solid red. So does someone have an actual address? We'll go up to the search and we'll type in an address. Okay. Hang on 1 second. Hang on. Oh, I know what that is. 4, 5, whoops, 8, 0. And do you notice how it starts searching through the postal address? Right? And so there it is, right? You see that? I'm going to click on that. Take a minute. It takes a minute to load up. And I like to minimize to show you in relation. So this is a high severity zone, not very high, but high, and it's in a state responsibility area. So who's going to do the inspection when these guys sell this house? CAL FIRE, not the local fire department. Anybody else have another address they'd like me to search? Anybody on the chat? Wait, hang on 1 second, because the Zoom can't hear you unless I put you on the microphone, and we want them to be a part of it too.
Is there anything that we should know about moderate severity zones? Is it something that can change, as we see fire patterns changing?
Good question. What's your name? Thank you, Shivangi. Okay, so Shivangi's question is, what about if you're in a moderate zone? Are we concerned about that changing? So CAL FIRE just changed their maps recently. If they change their maps, we're going to change our maps immediately. As soon as they're changed, we change. You're going to know from the NHD. But when it comes to you as a homeowner, if I'm in a moderate zone, do I have to get fire insurance? Very likely. I'm going to tell you that if I'm in a no fire zone, let's just show you something interesting. See if I can find one. Okay, let's go up here. If I can get it to move. See this red? See that little part right in the middle there that's not at all a fire zone, that's gray? If my house was there, do you think that I'm going to need fire insurance? Heck yeah. If my house was over here, right here in this little section, do you think, or moderate, that yellow right there, or that yellow right there, do you think that the lender's going to ask for fire? I'm surrounded by a high severity, very high severity zone. So there are times when you're not even going to be in a fire zone, but you are hooked up right next to one or right in a very close proximity where the lender's going to go. Because by the way, I don't write homeowners insurance. We have some gentlemen here who can answer questions for you, but the reality is it's a tough gig right now, as you can tell. Get ready. I'm telling you, get ready. Your insurance is going up, your homeowner's insurance, because I don't care if you're in a fire zone or not. We're all going to pay for what's going down. And our auto insurance is going up too. Just get ready. Get ready. So my homeowner's insurance already just went up. I just saw it. I'm sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but get prepared because there's no way the federal government will have to step in on what's happened in LA, but there's no way these insurance companies can survive. If they were only writing in California, they'd be bankrupt. They'd be all out of business. If they were only writing in Florida or these other areas where they've had major problems, they'd be bankrupt. But because they write through the entire nation, most of them, they're still in business. And then you've got the California Fair Plan, which isn't always so fair. But just make sure there's things that you want to know. We were just talking about whether or not a house held in a trust. Should you have your insurance, the name of the trust on your insurance, which I believe you should. But, you know, let's face it, companies that are taking money from you to insure you, they want to keep the money as long as they can. And so they're going to find ways not to give you money until they absolutely have to. So, you know, when you're guiding, what a great reach out to your database, do some research. Don't say something that isn't true, but it's a great email to send out to your database to say, hey, you may want to not only check to see how your house is held into your insurance, but also, do you have the coverage that you should have, that you need? So I was telling my husband the other day, I was reading and I was talking actually to a gentleman who works for a company that goes in and negotiates to get you more money from your insurance company. They exist, believe it or not. They did the Twin Towers. This company did huge wineries that burned down in Napa. And, you know, insurance companies are going to give you sometimes what they want to give you. And then they actually figure out what it would cost to rebuild to the nail, every nail. And sometimes they'll negotiate $200,000 or $300,000 more than what the insurance company wanted to give them. So I was talking to this gentleman who does that negotiation usually it's for people who have heavy insurance, not underinsured people. And he said, most people don't realize that other structures are your fences. So I've got a sauna. I have a shed that has all of our tools and e-bikes in it. You know, I've got all of that. I've got a special fence around my pool that is Ipe wood from Brazil. And all of my fences, and I just did one fence that's probably a little longer than that wall over there, just one section. How much do you think that cost me? And we split it with we paid more than our neighbor because we wanted it higher. But anyway, how much do you think that one fence cost me? Oh man, there's all kinds with $7,000 for half the fence. Okay. So other structures, the coverage we had covered up to $5,000 in other structures. I'm not going to be able to rebuild my sauna, my e-bike shed and tool shed, all of that stuff that's out there that we spent. And I have a whole patio covered with the solar on it for our pool. And I'm like, we have to up that game. So just good reason to reach out to your database and say, hey, I'm here to help you. I also have, and it's not on this webinar, but I know we've gone over time, so I appreciate if you're on Zoom and you have to leave. I have a couple of scripts that I've written for agents One of them is, and this is how you can build business out of your natural hazard disclosure, believe it or not. So one of the components in the NHD is the supplemental tax estimator. How many here have sold more than a couple of houses? In this past couple years, who sold more than a couple houses? Come on, right? Okay, of everyone here that's sold homes, has a buyer called you 6 months after escrow, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, and said, what is this supplemental tax bill? I thought our exactly. And you have the conversation with them every time, right? So here's a little tip and trick. Inside the natural hazard is a tax estimator built right in, because we pulled that property. We know the taxes for that property, right? So you simply type in the sale price in the estimator, and then you push the month you're closing and it will calculate for you. Don't do it on your iPhone. It doesn't work. But anyway, you can do it on your computer and or your laptop with your buyer and say, okay, so here's what happens when you sell your home. The owner has the taxes here. They've owned this house for 20 years. Here's their property taxes, and yours are here, right? There's that difference. That's called the supplemental tax. That's not your property taxes that you're now paying and in your impounds account. So if the lender pays a little extra into your loan and it's in that escrow account and you get this nice big hefty rebate check from escrow, do not spend it. Put it in your savings. I'm telling you 3 times. What did I just say? Have them repeat it, because you're going to get this bill. It's going to come. It's going to come like a baby. You don't know when. And it might be twins, rarely triplets, sometimes twins. So anyway, they might divide it into 2 bills or 3. So when you get that, you're going to be, what is this? And you're going to call me and I'm going to say, remember we talked about so why not get ahead of the 8 ball, but also have a reason to reach out? So I have a script with that I'm happy to, Margaret or Renita are happy to send you if you reach out to them. And that is, hey, I was thinking about you. You were on my mind. Who doesn't like to hear that? You know, that you're on somebody's mind. I wanted to reach back because when we talked about before you closed about the supplemental tax bill, we calculated that together. Remember, it was going to be like $2,898 or $10,590, whatever. And so you can just save that in your phone, in your calendar, to reach back to that client in like 3 months, because they're probably not going to get it in 3 months. They're going to probably get it in 6 months or 8 months. So reach back to them a few months after close of escrow. And then what do you always do after you discuss whatever with your client? Who do you know? Do you have anybody you know at work, family, friends that could use my services to help them buy or sell their home? Keep yourself top of mind, because if you do that every time you talk to them, then when they're having a conversation with, what's your name? Tabitha, you're my girlfriend. We're talking and you say, you know what? We're going to buy this house in Shingle Springs. Oh, you've got to use my realtor. She's amazing. You know, she keeps on top of things, but they're going to think of you. And because you ask them every time you call, oh, by the way, do you have anybody who would like to buy or sell real estate that you know of? Then they're going to be like, I got to find someone for Tabitha. You know, they're going to think that way. Another script that I have is about in the tax section. If someone has gotten I almost want to throw up when I talk about this, Pace Hero Y Green loan, one of those horrible loans that you put on your house to get heat and air, solar, windows, blah, blah, blah. It's a government backed loan that saves you energy, that is spread out over 20 years. So by the time you have the overpriced $18,000 windows that you put in, you've paid $98,000 for them. It's crazy. So I have a script on that with even a math calculation of if this, then this, because they're better off putting on a roof or heat and air with a second, or finding another way, saving the money. Some people get those not realizing that they will have to be paid off. A lot of people think, well, it's a tax lien against my property, so I'll just pass that on. Tabitha, if I sell you my house with my roof that's 5 years old that I've got with a PACE loan, and I still owe, you know, $18,000 on it, but the payoff on it is 36. Do you want to take that on and pay the current value on my house? Heck no. And no lender is going to take second position. They won't. I have never seen one. I know they can be assumed, but I have never seen a lender assume a Pace Hero Y Green type loan. So I have a script for that too, that you can call anybody in your database. And the beautiful thing is, as realtors, you know, what's better, a pool or a new kitchen on the value of a home? Everybody knows that. How do you know? Why do you know that? Because you know that that's what, not everybody wants a pool, but everybody wants a kitchen, right? And a new kitchen that's done right is of more value. But a lot of homeowners don't realize that. They think if they put $100,000 pool in their backyard, it's going to raise their value 100 grand, which is not the case. So how important to let them know, hey, when you're thinking about improvements and you want to get the most ROI, return on your investment, reach out to me. I can help you with that. So it's a great script and a reason to reach back to your entire database, not just. And who doesn't need a reason to call people, right? And a good reason is just to tell them you've been thinking about him. Even if you haven't called him in 5 years, you should do it. Yes, sir.
Some lenders are changing the fire map and including areas that were downgraded, but now according to them, they are. Has your company run into any issues where somebody the lender called up and said, hey, listen, we have this house in a high severity area, fire area, and your mapping doesn't say that?
Again, we are not an insurance company that sells homeowners insurance. We are a natural hazard disclosure company bound by the law.
But have you had?
And when people call me about insurance questions and what the insurance maps are, I'm like, I have nothing to do with that. I have no control over that. But I do know, and I have heard, sir, that some insurance companies, like when we looked at this right here, this map right here, if this little section right here is absolutely not in a fire zone, but they're surrounded by high and very high severity zones, I think their insured would probably put them in one, even though the CAL FIRE has not. We can't speak on that. We can't change what we do mapping wise because we are providing the legal portion of the report. Sorry if that happens from your lender. I don't know what to say on that. I might show them the maps and maybe take it to task, but I doubt you're going to change their mapping and how they want it. Any other questions before yes, hang on 1 second.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm Michelle. So I had two people who were asking, oh, with all these fires, what's going to be happening next with insurance? And like I'm saying, expect your rates to go up. But I have seen in looking at the way that the lenders and insurance are doing, they've upped all of Santa Clara County to be very high fire zone, even if you're in city. So,
They're going to cut their losses somehow.
But the question I had is, do you know if there was a fire like in a condo complex? I have a client in a condo complex. They just had a fire. He's like, what's going to happen for us? Are we going to need to do new kind of insurance? I don't know if anyone has any insight into that at all.
Well, again, I'm not an insurance broker, but I do know that if you have a large claim on your own home, it's very likely your insurance is going to go up. That's why I tell my kids, never turn in a claim on a fence that blew down that's 5 feet, or never turn in a claim on something stupid that costs you $1,000 to fix. It's the big stuff you want to get help with. You don't want to turn in little bitty claims because not only do insurance claims follow the house, they follow the person. And if the insurance company see you have a history over the years of turning in tons of little stuff every time, you're not going to have an easy time finding good insurance for a reasonable rate. So, but I'm not an insurance salesperson. I just know how the game is played a little bit. But I would say that for you, get with a really good, knowledgeable, well-educated insurance broker. Ask those questions. And if the seller maybe is not in the best insurance plan for them, maybe they need to shop for a better. But I would be very careful and cautious to give my opinion on who they should go with. Just like real estate agents don't give handyman and all that kind of stuff out to, because if something goes wrong, they can come back on you, right? That was not too long ago that Carr put that out there. You got to be so careful. So just make sure that you word any conversations and emails. I've given this class probably, I don't even know, 200, 300 times, maybe more. And I will have an agent call me or email saying, you said this, and it was absolutely the opposite of what I said. And I'm like, nope. And so I'll be like, if this, then this and this and this. I type back the absolutes. Be careful, because people hear, they turn off their listeners sometimes, and they hear what they want to hear, or they hear pieces of. So be careful how you know, if it's not your wheelhouse, do you give advice on taxes? Heck no, no tax advice, right? You are not a CPA, or you're not their CPA. And so you got to, any of that kind of stuff, you want to push it off to the professional and you want to make sure that, you know, I would say to them, I would love to tell you what I think, but that's not my wheelhouse. So I'm going to send you to the best person to answer your questions. Okay. Well, thank you for coming, and we truly appreciate your attendance, and Jody for putting this together with Margaret and Renita. Thank you, Margaret and Renita, for the nice lunch. That was very sweet.
And just to let you guys, I know it looks like there's some of you in here. We had about 120 people in total listening and being here today. So this is super important. March 18th, Tuesday, we have a fire insurance panel. So a lot of the insurance stuff where she said, not mine. March 18th.
Come to that. That's going to answer all those other
Yep,
questions.
we're gonna have Tony Ventura, who's an attorney. We're gonna have Carl Lee, who's an agent that just did a transaction that hung on by its teeth in a fire zone. And then we've got two insurance, a broker and somebody from State Farm, and possibly one more. So come ask your questions. They're gonna talk about maps. They're gonna talk about all those things as well. And just my aunt and uncle in Bonnie Doon, they pay $8,000 a year to a company in North Carolina.
Another thing I would do if it was me, just a suggestion, is find a really good reputable licensed tree company and ask them, do you know how to help my seller pass their defensible space inspection for the trees itself? Because that can really save you a lot of pain instead of the wildfire disaster report that's going to rip that place apart. If you have a good company and then they get referrals from it to remove trees or trim trees, on the, I don't know if I'm able to go back to that site, back to my, yeah. If you look on the page that is the AB 38 page, thank you. At the bottom, we also give you a link underneath that little green circle with the house is a link to CAL FIRE's website. Literally, that is invaluable. I'm going to tell you, it'll show you lists of everything that needs to be done. It will show you videos of what it needs to look like. They will show you tutorials on how to get it done. So CAL FIRE does have a fund for people who do not have money to create defensible space, but it goes fast. So you could look at that, do some research on that, but I would never promise my homeowners that they could get that money, and they would have to prove that they are somewhat indigent, can't afford to take those trees out. They may be able to get some help. Another biggie is get a hold of your local municipality, like you've got, I don't know what it's called here in the Fair Oaks, Sacramento area, it's called SMUD, PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric. Those kinds of power organizations will come and take out trees that are encroaching on power lines if they see that it's going to be a damage, and that's big money. And they'll do it they do it and you don't have to pay for it. So that's another way to kind of help your seller or homeowner get some of their defensible space created by getting rid of trees that are a problem. Okay.